Imagine working 10 hours a day inside a roaring American factory. The machines never stopped, the noise never stopped. And when your shift finally ended, there was still one problem left. What were you going to eat? Because the workers who built America's industrial cities weren't eating the food we associate with modern America. There were no giant supermarkets, no fast food chains on every corner. And for millions of working families, one bad week at the factory could mean one less meal on the table. Yet somehow, these workers kept showing up, day after day, year after year. And the secret wasn't some miracle food. It was a surprisingly simple combination of bread, potatoes, vegetables, and cheap cuts of meat. Food designed for one purpose: to keep working people alive, full, and strong enough to return to the factory tomorrow. This is the forgotten food story behind America's factory towns. In the late 1700s and throughout the 1800s, America was changing rapidly. Production that had once happened in homes and small workshops was moving into factories. One of the earliest major transformations happened in New England, where textile mills began appearing along rivers. In 1790, the Blackstone River Valley became one of the birthplaces of America's Industrial Revolution. Factories created jobs, but they created something else too. Entire communities built around work. Mill villages appeared where fields and forests had once stood. Companies didn't just build factories. They built houses, stores, schools, churches, and sometimes entire towns. Because the factory needed workers, and those workers needed somewhere to live. And once thousands of people were living around a factory, someone had to feed them. Think about the average factory worker. The workday could be brutally long. Before modern labor protections became widespread, working 10 or more hours a day in crowded factories was not unusual. So food wasn't simply about taste, it was fuel. For working-class families, daily meals often revolved around inexpensive foods that could stretch across many mouths: bread, potatoes, vegetables, and cheaper cuts of meat. The United States Department of Labor's historical records show that families who carefully managed their budgets could put these foods on the table, but many still lived dangerously close to poverty. That meant the person controlling the household food budget had an enormous responsibility. A few extra cents spent here could mean less food later. And in some industrial communities, workers didn't even cook all their meals themselves. They ate where the company provided them. Take Lowell, Massachusetts. In the 1800s, textile corporations built boarding houses for mill workers. And these weren't just places to sleep. Room and board could cost workers between $1.25 and $1.50 per week during the 1830s and 1840s. For that money, workers received a bed in a shared room, limited laundry service, and 3 meals a day. Imagine that. You worked in the mill. You returned to the boarding house, and someone had already prepared your next meal. The system was efficient, but it also revealed something important. Food had become part of the industrial system itself. The factory needed workers, the workers needed housing, and the workers needed food. Everything was connected. But some workers needed much more food. Now move west into the logging camps of industrial America. Here, workers performed brutally demanding physical labor for hours at a time, and their food requirements could be enormous. Historical research from the National Park Service records that logging camp cookhouses commonly served 3 to 5 meals a day to dozens or even hundreds of lumberjacks. Their diets averaged as much as 9,000 calories per day. That's not because they were sitting around eating for pleasure. Their work demanded it. In some camps, feeding the workforce became a logistical operation of its own. One California lumber company even maintained its own farms, ranches, dairies, and slaughterhouses to supply its cookhouse. The factory town had become something bigger than a workplace. It was an entire economic ecosystem. But there was another side to this story. Industrial workers weren't simply living in convenient little communities. Many were struggling. By the end of the 1880s, the Department of Labor estimated that roughly 40% of working-class families in a middle-sized industrial town earned less than about $500 a year. That income was considered insufficient for a family of 5 to enjoy basic amenities without sacrificing necessities. and about 1/4 lived in what the source described as total destitution. So when we picture an old American dinner table, we shouldn't imagine abundance. We should imagine calculation. How much bread is left? How many potatoes? Can we afford meat this week? Can the children eat enough? Mama? And can the family make it until payday? That was the reality behind many of America's industrial meals. And here's where the story gets interesting. The food of factory towns didn't just feed workers, it helped create the culture of industrial America. Immigrants arrived from places like Ireland, Germany, Italy, Poland, and Scandinavia. They brought cooking traditions with them. They lived beside people from different backgrounds. They worked in the same factories, they shopped in the same communities, and they ate around the same tables. Places like Pullman, Illinois, became remarkably diverse industrial communities. By 1885, less than half of Pullman's residents were native-born, with large immigrant populations from several European countries. Food became one of the places where these different worlds met. Old recipes adapted to new ingredients. Traditional meals became cheaper. And immigrant cooking slowly became part of American working-class food culture. America's Industrial Revolution is usually remembered through machines, steel, railroads, factories, smoke. But behind every machine was a worker, and behind that worker was a meal, a plate of potatoes, a piece of bread, vegetables stretched across several days, a bowl of something hot after a long shift. Sometimes 3 meals a day in a crowded boarding house, sometimes enormous meals served in a logging camp. The food wasn't glamorous. It wasn't designed to impress anyone. It had one job: keep the worker going. Because America didn't become an industrial powerhouse simply because machines became faster. It happened because millions of ordinary people got up every morning, walked into factories, mills, mines, and camps, worked exhausting hours, and then went home hungry. Someone had to feed them. And those simple meals became part of the foundation of modern America. So the next time you look at the giant industrial cities America built, don't just think about the factories. Think about the kitchens. Because behind the machines that built America was food. And without that food, the machines would have stopped.